Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to today's conversation on Gift of Healing TV. I'm Sarah Jane, and I'm delighted to be joined by my co-hosts, Scott Holmes. Scott, hi.
Hey, hey there.
And Michael. Michael's first time with us. Mike, now is it Overly?
Yes.
Or Overly? I'm dreadful of me not to have checked beforehand. I do apologize. So, Michael, thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the experience of being with us and for the first time and continue to join us.
Sure I will.
And our very special guest, the author of the book Called to Serve, Susan Ernst. Sue, thank you so much for joining us to be sharing some of how come you wrote the book, why you wrote the book, and some of the experiences potentially within the book. I'm sure we will have more questions for you, and we can sort of fill in some bits as well. But please share why Called to Serve. What actually helps you to feel you had to write this book and bring it out and share?
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah Jane, Scott, and Michael. Thank you all so much for this wonderful opportunity. I'm excited to share my book with the whole world. There it is. I served 5 years as a volunteer in a rescue center in Southeast Asia, where we were serving about 120 children each day who were rescued or at risk of sex trafficking. The location that I was in was basically surrounded by brothels and brick factories, and that's about it. 5 years worth. I came home knowing that I would promise myself that I would fight the crime of sex trafficking and do whatever I could to bring awareness to that crime and to the horrible impact it has on children for the rest of their lives, most often. And the last trip was taken in 2019, just prior to COVID, and then we were all shut down. In the last trip, I happened to collapse on the day before we came home. I became quite ill, and I was warned by my primary that it's probably your last trip. And it's one that I would not recommend you try to have a do-over right now. And I thought to myself, well, how can I do this? How can I keep my promise to myself and to those dear children that I fell in love with and who I can write? And I wrote the book. So that's one way.
Bless you. Thank you for sharing that. And it's a horrendous thing to happen, that the trauma a child must go through. It's actually almost beyond words, isn't it? The effect that it must have on those children. Well, the question I have is, wherever it was that you were, did you just work with the children there, or were you able to sort of get them out of where they were and get them to a place that was safer?
We worked with the children in the rescue center, which is very safe. It's behind big walls. It is guarded safe place for the children. What we did do that was a bit different, that helped us to really understand what we were doing, was that during our lunch hours, we went to where the children, some of them lived. Some of these children were coming to the center through sort of a daycare program. The parents that were able would bring their children there so that they could go and work during the day and know that the children would be safe. The parents that we were dealing with were working, not all of them, but the majority of what we saw were working in brick factories that are located surrounding the facility that we were serving. the brick factories are these horrible factories. They look, the brick ovens are perhaps 10 stories high, made of brick, and the smoke that comes from those ovens permeates the entire area. And the families, the children who lived with their parents at the brick factories, lived in little shacks. This was what they were given in turn for working in the ovens. They were given a home. The homes were not much more than, say, cardboard and pieces of sheet metal, leaned together in little tents, and they made these little shelters for themselves and lived within that smoke and heat of those ovens. And we would go on our lunch hours. We had made arrangements with a local farmer prior to the trips to purchase rice. And we took sacks of rice and delivered them to the families, to the parents at the brick factories. And I think that's probably where some of my most, where I learned so much and was just so impacted by the big picture of this whole thing. And it helped me to understand the desperation of the families that we were working with, and how in the world could a mother possibly sell her child, her daughter, and going and giving bags of rice, we were told, could easily save one child's life that day that may come in real close to being sold because the parents did not know what else to do to survive, pay the rent that they made to pay back to the brick factory owner. And now I got off track, and I don't know if I've answered your question.
Brilliant.
See, I get all emotional when I start talking about it. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, have you got a question or thoughts for Sarah?
Absolutely. So I've traveled through Southeast Asia and understand, or have an understanding of how a lot of the population lives. We live in the United States or UK, and we don't see a lot of that. My wife and I went to Malaysia, and we were on our way to a tea plantation, as part of the guided tour. And we stopped at a indigenous village. Now we walked through, it was a dirt road. The homes were there. They had doors and windows, but they were only openings. There was no doors or windows. They were just openings. And the roosters and the chickens were running around. The dogs were running around. The kids were running around with bare feet. And my wife got so upset she had to go back to the bus. It upset her so much to see the kind of poverty that we're talking about. We got back on the bus, and two of the gentlemen had lived in South America. They had lived in rural China. They have lived in Africa, and they had been doing work. And I asked them, how much of the world lives like this in the rural parts? We always go to the cities when we travel, right? We go to the big cities where there's skyscrapers, where there's people all over the place. And they said 65 to 75% of the world lives in that desperation, in making $20 a month for a family of 5. We look at that, I think, from the United States and look at it and say, how is that even possible? So I guess the question I have for you is, how did you went back 5 times. How did you, and I was very blessed to have read your book already.
Thank you.
How did you, and how were you able to go back on continuously? And it's a rigorous trip, I know. Knowing the hardships, knowing what you were going to see. I mean, that's got to be incredibly emotional, just in doing the work on a daily basis while you're there.
You couldn't stop me if you wanted to. That's the answer. It's an interesting question. I haven't thought of it that way in a long time. I could hardly wait to go back. I didn't want to go home. I wanted to stay. I wanted to fix it. That's the big problem with people like me that go over to try to do this sort of work. You want to fix it. You can't. And we had, we knew that, and we were prepared for that, but you can never be really prepared. And so knowing how big the issue is, how big the problem is, I felt I had to go back. I was so fortunate that I had enough family and friends that I could beg money off of and gather up the funds that I needed to get me there. And the fundraisers that we had to buy the supplies that we needed to take over. It's a big deal. And we're very, very fortunate people. I felt shamefully rich during that period and so thankful for it. And so each time we were invited, please come back, it was an absolute yes. And can we stay a little bit longer this time?
Wow. And the conditions were not optimal, if I'm not mistaken.
The conditions, once again, spoiled American people. We worked, we had a driver in a big old rickety bus. So that was actually one of the highlights of the whole week, was riding in that van and getting to see the countryside as we went to this secret address where the center is situated. And he drove us there, so we were safe. He drove us back, we were safe. We stayed in a hotel in the center of town where we were safe, and all went out to dinner together for dinner and came right back home, got to bed early and got up real early and went back to that center. The center, the facility and the location that it is in, like many of the rescue facilities around the world, are not in safe places. They're right where the action is, most of them, and they can be quite dangerous, but we were never really in danger. Did I answer your question? I'm doing it again.
No,
I'm
thank you
landing myself right there, and I'm right there.
No, you're perfect with really describing your experience, and that's what this is all about, is really allowing people to understand it. Michael, what have you got?
Oh, I read the book early as well, Sue. And
Thank you.
I was surprised to become aware of how much, maybe as an American or whatever, how much I want to keep my head in the sand as to what is actually going on in the world that we're not witness to, that we're not exposed to. It was really moving for me. I mean, I during your book, I laughed and I cried, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it rocked me as to what I would consider hard or challenging in my life based on my own experiences. With that, I want to know how has this shaped you? 5 years, five different trips there. You haven't been back for some time. You wrote the book years later. How has this shaped you into who you are now and how you show up in the world and what you continue to do?
I came home on that last trip in 2019, and sort of a bad landing. That was the last. I got incredibly sick and had to heal from that. And that didn't stop me. All I could think of was, oh, come on, let's just start raising money. We're going to go back again. There's so much work to be done. And we couldn't. COVID hit, and those years went by. And I came back with just a desire to figure out at my age, at that point, approaching retirement, but a little ways off, what can I do? How can I go forward and do something that really matters? When I wrote the book, and watch out, a question's coming for you guys with this one. When I wrote the book, I thought, this is awesome. I wrote the book. I finally got it out of my heart onto those pages after 5 years, and it got out there thanks to my daughter. But anyway, and now I'm going to sell 1 million of these, and I'm going to take that money and I'm going to go back, or I'm going to build another rescue facility, or I'm going to do something huge. What happens, what you find out, which we all know, but I've learning the hard way, this is a hard subject to talk about. I want to go out and change the world. I want to fix this. I want to stop this horrible, disgusting crime. I'm stuck in the water. If I bring it up, as one of my friends said, she can clear a cocktail party in 5 minutes when she starts to talk about the subject. That's what I found is the sales of the book are just kind of mediocre. You get the rush of family and friends being so kind and buying your book. You have wonderful colleagues like you reading the book because you care. You're humans that really care. And you wrote absolutely beautiful reviews. But the majority of the people that I talked to about it, I'm assuming they've read the book. And I said, what did you think about the book? Well, I haven't really read it yet. It just kind of makes me cringe. I don't know that I want to read that, Sue. It's dark, it's creepy, it's ugly, and that's what you get. If they would read the book, they'd see that I'm writing about love and play and how they were the strongest healing modalities we had in our little toolbox. And how far, oh my God, this is where I get very, how far a little bit of love can go. This book is, I had to tell the ugly part so people could understand why the good part is needed so badly and so desperately. But to me, that's the message. And Michael, to your point, what I've been doing very recently, I just completed a certification course in child abuse. I wanted to become as smart as I possibly can about the subject. And I want to take it forward. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going to take this. I don't think it'll be another book. It's going to be some other way, but I'm not going to stop fighting the fight. If I might just throw another little bit in there. Well, no, I'm going to ask you my question to you. Do you agree with me? And I'm curious about men like you, Michael and Scott. How do you feel when people bring up sex trafficking? It's just got to be crummy for good men to have to, I don't know. How do you react to it? Sarah Jane, did it make you feel real uncomfortable? Was it a really uncomfortable read? Did you feel like it was worth it afterwards?
I think for me, it's out there. And it's not just young girls. It's boys as well.
Absolutely.
There are women who are abusive. There are men who are abusive. It is not just about one gender.
That's true. Yeah.
It is men to boys and women to girls. It crosses that whole, it's the whole gamut of it. There isn't an aspect that's left out. And it is essential. And I think it matters where you are in the world. It's going on with children, with teens, with young adults being abducted, and it's just like, and being groomed. How many times do we hear the stories of and it's usually young girls, but it does happen to young boys as well, being groomed for people to do these things to them. And by the time they realize what is happening, they haven't got a voice.
Right.
And so it is, if we don't say something, if we don't use our voice, which is why, to me, having you here on this program was essential. It's part of Gift of Healing TV. It is about healing our world and the people within our world. And the sooner that we find ourselves in that place where anybody found doing these things is prosecuted, and there can't be, slip a bribe under the table, whatever, to prevent that from happening, the sooner that comes about, the better for all of us in this world. It will happen, but we all have to use our voice.
Yes.
To do that, regardless of where in the world we are and where in the world it's happening.
The Dr. Pamela J. Pine wrote the foreword in my book. She has been fighting the crime of sex trafficking for over 25 years. We were just talking on the phone yesterday. We've become very good friends during this process. I took the child abuse course through her organization. Pamela was saying that 25 years ago, 1.4 girls and 1.6, 1 out of 4 girls and 1 out of 6 boys are abused. The statistic is exactly the same today. And so, Michael, again, back to your question, where is this taking me? The crime is so big. It's the most lucrative crime on the globe. It makes more money than any other crime on the globe. It's a hard one to fight. There's so much corruption and, evil stuff behind it. I think for me, to keep myself sane and comfortable at this stage of my life, I'm on the healing side. I'm going to focus on helping children, especially in this country where online grooming and online trafficking has become profound. Help them to gain awareness, to understand, look for the clues, look for the little signs that something might not be quite right, work on those areas. One thing I found in my research that was just fascinating was that I was doing a study on the foster child here in America as a report for my class, and learned that the aged out foster child, the child that is not adopted or given a permanent home, by the time they reach 18 or 21 here in Washington, D.C., they age out of the program. The funding stops for the family that was caring for that child. Many times that aged out child is left on the street. They are the most vulnerable child there is in terms of the likelihood of being trafficked. It's fascinating right here in our country. And I did a little research on the foster care system here. There's a lot of work to be done in that area alone to strengthen some systems that are very good, but there aren't enough people to run them, that kind of thing.
Michael, she had asked about how you felt or what it brings up for you.
I get angry. I get mad, and then I realize I need to look at myself and how I look at other people in the world. How I was raised and how I've personally objectified women, and when I look at a woman, what do I do? What do I think? It sent me into some really interesting areas that I had never really investigated in myself before. So I want to own all of that so that I can show up better. I can be more available to help people in the way that I do, to be as real as I possibly can and live my life in integrity. So yeah, I told you that book shook me.
So you're doing your job, Susan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being shaken.
The other part you had asked about, as a man, how did that make me feel? And I had 3 daughters, so there is that dad hovering, trying to keep them close enough so that nothing bad happens. Thankfully, as far as I know, nothing as traumatic as any of that happened with them. But here lies the thing that came up for me is, with everything that's going on in the world, I mean everything, and in the US, UK, how fractious everything is. It is people not speaking up enough. The old saying that when the Nazis came for the gypsies, I didn't say anything. When they came for, those who were ill, I didn't say anything. When they came for everybody else, I didn't say anything. And by the time they came for me, there was no one left to speak. You are speaking for all of those people. Having traveled in Southeast Asia, I understand it. I traveled through the big cities, Bangkok, and a lot of the bigger cities throughout Southeast Asia, and prostitution and all of that is very, very, while it's quote unquote illegal, wink, wink, nod, nod. It is just displayed on the streets. We would go out for dinner, and if there were 2 or 3 guys, we were constantly, come. I have girls. And it was, for me, it was very tough to deal with that, knowing that, and I talked to somebody who was from some of the countries, and they're imported from outside. They're the countryside. They're brought in. These are most of them brought in, not told. They told they're getting a job, and then they're put into brothels. There are all of these things that happen on a constant basis. And the other aspect of this, and I'm glad you brought it in the foster care system, is we have first world problems. We're in the U.S. and U.K. right here. It goes on. There was just more window dressing on it.
Absolutely.
There's more window dressing on it. It happens. And no matter where you are in the world, there is a section of life, a level of life those things happen on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. You can rail against the system and scream and holler and not do any good, or you can put your energies into the right spots. Yes, you wrote the book, and it is riveting. It is. I laughed, I cried, just like Michael. It really made me feel and understand, and the fact that that love that you brought, didn't matter the language, didn't matter if they couldn't understand English. It didn't matter. All they knew is you were there in love, and they understood that. That part of it, and you speaking, whether it's this platform, well, you live in DC, so I wouldn't be surprised if you aren't going to be in front of a Senate or House subcommittee speaking about this subject at some time. If I know you well enough, you're going to have the ability to present yourself in that respect, because it's grassroots efforts that change legislation.
Thank you.
It's not top down, it's bottom up.
The news just came out this week that the feds are looking at pulling the funding for the sex trafficking, the work to fight that here in this country, which is very discouraging.
Yeah, because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
If you don't have a problem and you don't put any money to it, then it doesn't exist, of course.
It's so sad. I think, do we have enough time for a little bit more story, Sarah Jane?
Oh my gosh, we have plenty of time.
One thing that comes to mind is in the book, I write about a little girl. Happens that she was 4 years old. In the book, I say it looks like she must be about 5. She was 4, and she stood there one morning at the doorway, nervous, wanting to come in, but not sure what to do. She was unescorted, a 4-year-old, and full makeup, turquoise eyeshadow, and big red lips, and her hair all braided beautifully. And you might remember this in the book. I wrote about the two of us sitting there greeting the children, and we spotted her with it. Oh my God, it looks like she's groomed. She's going to be sold. And as volunteers doing that work, it was not our job. We could not address that specific issue. We couldn't pick her up, which I would have, under my arm and take, we're not allowed to do that. There are professionals there that are doing the hard work of those hard stories that would come up. But we wondered, we knew that the counselors were watching. We knew that they were eyeing her from the corners of the room, that sort of thing. I wrote in the book that we never knew what happened. We didn't hear the end of that story. And we learned just recently that I need to keep the specific names out of this story, but the director of that facility got wind of what was up. And before anything could happen to that child, he found his way to her parents and made them alone so that child would not be sold. And that child is now one of their teachers. She's, it's just, that's why. That's the big why. I think, we came home that first year, man, I cried a lot of tears, realizing the futility of it all. I felt it was so futile. My goodness, this is, the poverty is so grim. It's they're so strikingly poor. The abuse is so prevalent. We'd see little burns on their arms all the time, little cigarette burns where they'd been abused and by their own family members, that sort of thing. Just grim, grim, grim. And then we finally got it. Save one heart, save one child. If you can say you did that, you've done it all. That's you got to go into the fight with that, that mentality. But one thing I wanted to share was that in those years when I was doing that work, I had never done that before. We built houses in Mexico. We'd gone down to Mexico a lot and building houses for the poor and, doing what we could, bring clothing to the poor, making 5,000 hygiene kits. That was easy, right on our border. Nothing like these trips. This was all very, very new. And I was a little bit like a deer in the headlights, especially in the beginning. And by the 5th year, I was pretty pro at it. But I did not have the awareness that I have today of the global presence of trafficking. Just as you were saying, Scott, people tend to think, oh, it happens over there. Those poor people. I am so sorry for those poor people, but what can I possibly do? Well, you can look in your backyard. You can look within your own family. Stuff is happening if you're not very careful. And that's the part where I also think I can take an active role on working and finding a way to educate this crowd. Especially as it relates to online trafficking. It's just epidemic. It's unbelievable how prominent it is. And I have a family member, where we'll go to families' houses and the kids are on their little machines or they're in their bedroom. The teenagers are in their bedroom and they're locked on their computers. That is where it's happening, right behind you. It can be the nicest, sweetest family in the whole world doing exactly what they think is right. And that's what is so insidious about this crime. The groomers are they're way ahead of you on that one. They know all the tricks. And that's the fight that I want to fight now.
It's so important that we say what we see and we open our minds to see. I spent 10 years, and it was just what they called shared care of adults with learning difficulties. And so there was an awful lot of I'd only have them for a couple of hours a week or whatever. It was giving their main carers a bit of a break, being able to sort of take them out, do things with them. Sometimes it was just helping them to do a little bit of shopping, food shopping, or just something nice. One of the guys I was with, spent 5 years going to the cinema with him once a month. The films I saw that I would never have chosen to see, but it was part and parcel. But there was so much training that went with that, awareness in case there was abuse going on with whether it was the family home or wherever it was they were living. Most of the people I worked with, it was the family home. And it was just being aware and being there for them. And I did get sort of involved in some of the centres very briefly. It wasn't an awful lot, because I ended up by taking a small group, and there were actually two of them, over to America, and we did a 3-week trip called Spirit of Freedom. We did Yellowstone Park. We spent a week with the Nez Perce in Idaho, and we saw other areas. And it was amazing to be able to do that with them. But it was also being aware of them as individuals and making sure they were okay in our charge. And that was adults, but I also spent a bit of time working with children with learning difficulties and behavioral problems. That is really difficult, very difficult, because they were difficult. But it's but you find your heart going out to them.
Absolutely.
Because that was within our NHS, so it wasn't even within their family homes. It was within a facility. So it's being aware that there is so much going on out there, way, way more than I don't listen to the news because I don't want and don't need to hear of everything that is going on. It doesn't mean that I'm blind to what is going on in this world.
Yeah.
Because now we have the internet. You may not listen to the news on the television or on the radio, but you still get to see things and read things and hear things.
What I think is so interesting about what you just said is that the kids, especially, let's talk about our country for a minute. The kids do listen to the news. They get it at school a lot. They watch, and they don't just get it like we did back in the day when we'd see still pictures of things. They really see the news. And the children in this world, in this country, need to know how to deal with fear and grief. I think this is so important that kids, it's the young kids, it's our wonderful hero in the climate change. I just had a senior moment. Gretchen, what's her beautiful name? Anyway, it's kids fighting the fight.
Yeah.
So when we as adults say, because I do the same thing, Sarah Jane, I'm not isolating you on this one. Let's say I'm sick of watching the news. I don't want to hear anything more. It's just too deep. We kind of have to at some level. We kind of need to stay aware, because this ugly world that we don't want to look at, the kids are looking at it. And so for me, trying to help kids, I know that we need to have the words. We need to have the ability to sit and truly listen to them when they express their fears or their sadness, and tell them you believe in their story, that their story is important and it's real. And give them that trust, give them someone that they can trust, I think is what I'm trying to say.
It goes
to
back,
truly understand.
It goes back to our own child not being listened to. And, part of everybody's journey is the healing of our own inner child. And when we can do that, we can support adults, children, we can. And as you said, it is one person at a time. It is one child at a time. If somebody listens to this and realizes they're actually part of the problem, if it can help them to stop being part of the problem, because it is not only helping people to become aware, what can we do? It's helping people who are part of the problem to stop being part of the problem. How can we get to those people?
Right.
Well, I don't. You brought up a few things. In my family, we would sit around the dining room table, and I was always one that was always into causes. And I had two sisters and a brother, my mother and father. And while they were active in church, they really didn't talk about any problems in society. They didn't talk about anything else. They talked about banal things. Aunt Jessie and, Cousin Sue and a lot of the things. And I wanted to bring up important things. My best friend, he was one of four boys, and I would go over for dinner at their house, and they would talk politics. And each one of them had to kind of give their view on what was happening with the president, what was happening with the country, and all of that. And I was so enthralled with that, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I brought it to my family. We're sitting around having dinner. I said, "So what do you think about this?" Nothing. So in my life, I have tried to do whatever is in front of me, do the best of my ability to give back to, because I always felt, no matter where I was in life, that I was in abundance. I was born in this country, and I have abundance. So I always tried to make sure that I found and did things for other people who had less. It was always one of those things. And to your point, the story of the child on the shore, all these starfish had come out, brilliant, covered the beaches. And the child is there throwing starfish into the water. Picked one up and threw it in the water. A man comes along and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm saving starfish." He says, "You can't save all of them." He picks it up, throws it in the water. He said, "Nope, but I can save that one." So it's what we can do. When we talk about writing a single book is very tough. You have a single voice, and you're trying to push all of this out there. I've written in a number of collaborations, and when you get a collaboration like that, you get 15, 20, 25 people all pushing in the same, and it's magnified. So I would love anybody who's listening and watching the show, how can you magnify this in your life? How can you talk about it? Is it uncomfortable? Damn straight it is. It is not easy. We are taught we don't talk about those things. We are taught as a family. You don't talk. Every family has their secrets. There are things you don't say about Aunt Betty and Uncle Charlie. Forget about it. Uncle Charlie, what he did. Oh my gosh. But we don't talk about that. It's when we don't bring things up and don't have a voice and raise your voice to what is there and speak about it authentically and from the heart, that's when change happens. All of the changes that happened, especially in the United States, the things that happened came up grassroots. It was people who cared about what happened, and they forced legislation. They forced the government to make changes. In the same way, we need to voice this, whether it's on a local level, our small town, on a state level, on a bigger or a regional, or on the a country-wide level, to be able to change this, to make people aware. And maybe that awareness changes and saves someone's life from going down this path.
Absolutely.
Michael. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, Sue.
In the course that I just took, it was interesting. The students in the class, this is graduate work for some of them, were all required to, we were given 3 writing prompts, pick one, 300 words about it, and some other student in the class had to read that and opine on it, write a little something back to the other student. was the coolest exercise in the world. It's all, talking about stories. And I'm going to say most every family I know has a story. I had a story. My dad was an alcoholic. Life got pretty rough. I told my story. This young woman came back. I was older than everyone, of course, in the class because they were doing graduate work and I'm just taking the class. But this young woman came back and she said, "Sue, thank you. Oh my God, thank you for sharing your story." And I was just thinking, I don't mind talking about it. It's the story, And she said, "Thank you. Your courage to share that story with everyone." And then I'm thinking, oh God, what have I done? But she said, "Now I'm going to really share my story." She had written something kind of benign initially, and she came back and told the rest of her story. And it was a big story, and bless her heart, and I came back to her and I said, "I can top you, but I won't, right now." But the point was that as soon as the students were feeling comfortable that we all of us were going to share and not be afraid of being judged or anything, it was beautiful. And the stories started coming out during the course, bigger and better stories that were the truth, the real truth. And it was incredibly healing, I think. So to your point, Scott, I think that's it. If everyone would just not be afraid, we've all got the stories. It's okay to share them, and let's help each other.
Michael.
Someone's got to go first. So you writing this book is you going first in your version of this. You're sharing what you did in the class was inspiring to someone because it was outside of their normal range. And they're like, holy hell, she shared this amazing, scary thing. I could never talk about this. Well, you gave her permission. That's what we do. We give permission to others when we step up first and do the hard thing.
Yes.
I mean, you can pick your heart. It's hard to sit back and watch it and try not to let the world affect you. It's also hard to stand up and do the right thing. So I'd rather show up and just be torn to pieces because I tried, as opposed to being an armchair quarterback and telling everybody else how they should live their life.
Reminds me, whenever we go to a wedding, I'm always the first one on the dance floor. And of course, my partner is always, no. Everybody's waiting for that first person to get on the dance floor because you're only on the dance floor for about 10 seconds before everybody piles on because nobody wants to be first, right? They'll add on, but they don't want to break the ice. And I love the fact that you have broken the ice on speaking about this. It is not only is it admirable, but there is a courage involved in that. And I'm sure that you've had stilted conversations with people within your circle, those who, as you said before, oh, well, it's a little dark and, I only read romance novels. I don't want to deal with reality. I'm very happy in my very safe haven and knowing that I'm okay, but I really don't want to hear about what else is going on in the world. So I have the utmost respect for you doing that and being on the dance floor. Hopefully you don't look like Elaine in Seinfeld while you're doing that.
That's a good memory. That's kind of what the little kids thought when we all started dancing with them. It wasn't pretty.
And I'd offer you to share some other stories because I know there are more stories within the book about where the kids were, how they reacted to you. I mean, you were in a country that I don't believe was necessarily America, and so therefore it was a different culture entirely.
I think we were not the first team to do this work at the facility that we were serving at. Teams were coming from all over the world to serve, to give the counselors and the therapists and the workers respite from incredibly hard work. They're roughly, on a slow day, there were 90 kids. On a busy day, there were 125 kids. And then there are the safe houses where the rescued older girls primarily were housed and going through rehabilitation. And so not, the kids, the little kids that we got to know so well lived in the surrounding area. They'd gotten to know the people that run the facility. They had learned this is a safe place. So when they came there, they already had a built-in little bit of a comfort level, knowing that although they look really different than me, they're safe. They seem to be, and they were safe. And so the kids would typically just, as I wrote in the book, literally gallop up the stairs to find us and to have the day start and jump in our laps. And those stories that I wrote are verbatim. That's how it went down. We're sitting there timid, thinking, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We don't speak the language. What are we going to say?" It didn't matter. These kids were like, but the lesson that I had to, there were several lessons, but one was the topic of resilience, which I think is extremely important. And that's why I wrote about it in my book. I didn't want people to take my happy stories too lightly, because they're guarded stories. These children, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't describe it exactly right, but as I wrote about it, they're fawning, they're coming in there. Many of them all of them have been traumatized. Every kid that we met had been traumatized or abused on some level, but they're coming in knowing they're safe, and they're keeping a happy front, even though they have stories that they could tell that I would never ever believe were true. You know what I mean? And so what people would tend to mistaken that for incredible resiliency. Look at how kids just bounce back. My gosh. No. If this happened to you, or this happened to you, or this, or all three, no, they will never be fully healed from what they encountered. So these sweet kids that would come and jump in our laps, all I could do is just put my arms around them and hug them and just know that that's the lesson I learned. I didn't have to come with a whole bunch of knowledge. I didn't have to come with a book of this is what we should do now. Just love them. That's all they needed for that. And that's all we could really give with such a big language barrier and all of that. Just amazing stuff. And I think here in America, or in countries where you can speak the language, it's a different story. You can take all of this to a much deeper level. We had two psychotherapists on our team. One is Laura's sister. She accompanied us on one of the trips, and she provided therapy for the therapists who work there. Mm-hmm. That was an interesting lesson, to learn about vicarious trauma, how these beautiful therapists would hear these stories of abuse and horror that go beyond your imagination over and over again. And she was able to bring those young therapists some wonderful healing while we were there. And that was very, very special.
I think it's really important that the help for those centres is essential, and those children. And yeah, my mother says, "Oh, children are resilient," and I cringe every time I hear her say it. They're not. They don't know how to deal with the trauma they've experienced. And I know that from my own story, and that's got nothing to do with a physical abuse. But it was a mental and emotional by the hospital, by keeping my parents away from me when I needed them most. What does a child that is going through something like that require most? A hug and a cuddle, to feel listened to feel heard. And
absolutely.
How many young people are on our streets here in the UK, in the USA, Europe, everywhere in the world are on the streets because they feel safer on the streets than they do in their own family homes. And that's not the sex trafficking, but it's abuse within their family homes.
It's all this abuse is abuse. They were just trafficked to somewhere else to make it happen. So it's really all the same, abusive crime. And to your point, Sarah Jane, that listening to that child, being there for that child, like to me, the biggest gift we could give was the gift of listening and saying, we believe you. I believe what you're saying. I'm not going to scold you and accuse you of, lying or making something up. I think that's an important lesson. And it was interesting. We worked with interpreters in one of the pictures that I'll show you at some point. Possibly, maybe not. One of the young women that was rescued at that facility has grown up there and become an interpreter for the facility. She's so incredibly dear. And on occasion, I would have children that had decided I was kind of cool, even though they couldn't understand a word I said, and they would want to talk to me. And we would sit, and this sweet child would talk to me in their native language. The interpreter would interpret it for me, and I'd respond, and she'd interpret it back to the child. And I, only through interpretation did I know what the child was saying, but by looking at the child's little body and their face as they were talking, that's all that mattered. That's all that mattered. And simply saying, I hear what you're saying. I hear your story. And I'm so glad you were able to share it with me. And that's all I could really do. And can I give you a hug? And it goes a long way, I guess, is the point.
Yeah. Because I think that just adds to the trauma if the child isn't feeling listened to, isn't feeling heard, and isn't feeling loved and comforted. Because at the end of the day, that is what a child requires more than anything. We are coming to a close. So I'm going to go to the other two first, and then I will come to you. Scott, any final thoughts or comments you would like to make before we close?
This program is important because it brings to light something that doesn't get spoken about. When you see things in your community, please take a stand. If you see injustice, if you see abuse, if you see any of that, please take a stand or find out how you can make a stand. However, whatever form that takes. Thank you.
Michael.
Sue, phenomenal. It reminds me to show up for myself in ways maybe that I haven't before, to take better care of myself. From that place, I can show up better for other people. So the whole idea of just showing up. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any final words from you?
Just immense gratitude to all of you for this wonderful opportunity. This is really one of the first times I've had a chance to do something like this. And wow, I appreciate that. I appreciate thinking that I just spoke to 3 people, and perhaps those 3 people are going to share their story with 3 more people. And that's how the story is shared, and that's how awareness is created. Thank you all so much.
No, thank you to you for your courage and the work that you've done. It is so important, and we're grateful for that. And I'm sure there are an awful lot of other people out there who are. Folks, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Sue and her work, because I believe your book will be on your website, SusanErnstAuthor.com. I've put the website address in the chat. I will put it underneath the video on YouTube. So if you're watching it on YouTube, folks, you will find more there to check it out. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. These programs are only possible because of my co-hosts and because of our guests. So thank you. Next week, I am being joined by David McLeod, and we're going to talk about connecting with your future self. And I'm going to be sharing a meditative exercise so that hopefully you can do just that. There is an awful lot of wisdom and understanding, I believe, that we can connect, we can learn from our future selves. So maybe that's one for you, Sue, that will help you to sort of, how can I move forward? My future self already knows.
Excellent. Thank you.
Take care, folks. Be safe. Stay well. We'll be with you again soon. Please join us. Namaste, sweet souls. Bye.